Hello everybody, this is Kirby over yonder, and since it's the spooky month of October, I decided to take a look at some dark or off-putting episodes of Adventure Time. Adventure Time is a show with a ton of variety. One episode could be upbeat and fun, while the very next could be very grim and melancholic. You really never know what you're gonna get with this show. And with this list, we're discussing episodes that may have either tackled a difficult theme, hit way too close to home, or just have something in it that makes it very uncomfortable. So let's jump into the darkness together. Number 5. Don't Look. After gazing into the eyes of a dead hermit, Finn involuntarily changes the appearance of everyone he sees to match how he views them. It's a pretty neat concept, and it's cool to see physical representations of how Finn views his friends. But this episode gets dark when Finn turns Neptr, who's basically his son, into just a microwave. Most likely reflecting the often callous way Finn treats the little guy. This makes Finn start seeing himself as a gross monster, one that quite closely resembles his dad, Martin, as he's stuck in a place of depression and uncertainty. Thankfully, after some encouragement from his friends, Finn is able to see himself as normal again, and the episode has a fairly happy ending. But it's still a very intriguing episode that makes us think not just about Finn as a character, but about ourselves and the way we view other people. Number 4. The New Frontier. So Jake has a dream where he dies in space with a banana man, and when he sees said banana man in real life, he assumes that today must be the day where he croaks. It's basically an episode about Jake trying to kill himself. What's so weird about it is the fact that Jake honestly seems to be perfectly fine with it, claiming that it's his destiny, while Finn is understandably less excited about the idea of losing his best friend. This episode presents the interesting idea of our own fates being decided for us, and while I personally think that the human experience is far more complicated than that, this episode doesn't really side with either standpoint. It more so just shows the way that two different people would react to a situation like this. Number 3. 3 Buckets. Oh boy, this episode. Basically, Fern tricks Finn into getting himself locked up in a dungeon so he can take control over Finn's life. Throughout this entire episode, you can tell that something is definitely off with Fern. You get the sense that he's jealous of the life Finn has, which is understandable considering he previously thought he was Finn. But just looking at scenes like the way he blatantly disregards Finn showing compassion and empathy to him, make him out to be very cold and uncaring. I also love the fight scene in this episode. The fact that there's absolutely no music makes the scene feel very intense, and it makes the sound effects and dialogue really hit you. Fern's death is easily one of the most tragic scenes in the entire show. The way his face twists around while he's being killed is really disturbing. And the final scene in this episode is one of my favorite scenes in the entire show. The way that Finn just says nothing while Jake and BMO go to comfort him is really heart-wrenching. 3 Buckets is one of my favorite episodes of Adventure Time due to its ambiance and atmosphere, and it's definitely one of the darkest. Number 2. Princess Monster Wife. In this episode, the Ice King steals different body parts from a bunch of different princesses to make his own princess. It's a silly enough premise for an episode, but in execution makes an actually kind of somber episode. Throughout the entire episode, the Ice King's wife just sees herself as a monster. It's actually played pretty realistically too. Like, this feels like how a real person with body issues would act, seeing herself as a gross, ugly monster. The episode doesn't even make any jokes about it either. It actually handles the concept with a lot of care and respect. Though, to be fair, the way Finn and Jake reacted to her definitely didn't help. You get to see in this episode that Ice King actually makes for a pretty good husband. You wouldn't think he would, but he actually treats his wife with empathy and respect, and it never feels forced or out of character. While the episode certainly has its fair share of silly jokes, it's still a surprisingly somber yet thoughtful episode. Number 1. Escape from the Citadel. This episode. This episode. I've talked about this one before, but I still think it's the absolute darkest episode of Adventure Time. Following the events of the previous episode, Finn and Jake make it to the Citadel to meet Finn's dad, Martin, only for Finn to realize that his dad is a complete tool who doesn't care about him and only uses him to escape the Citadel. Which sends the strong message that just because someone's your family member does not make you obligated to like that person. Meanwhile, the Lich has been infecting the Citadel, turning its inmates into weird, gross monsters. And that speech that the Lich gives Finn just sends chills down my spine. The way Finn is just powerless under the Lich is just horrifying. And kudos to Ron Perlman for his terrifying yet fantastic performance as the Lich. But the most tragic part is easily the ending. Finn tries desperately to hold on to the Star Skipper as his dad's about to escape. His grass arm takes full control, and then it snaps off, leaving Finn with nothing but a flower for an arm. Then, Jake wraps his arm around Finn and tells him that everything is going to be okay. This episode is the darkest, not just because of the events themselves, but the fact that they will affect Finn throughout the rest of the series. And although it may be the darkest, it's also one of my favorites. You know, it's kind of funny. Adventure Time has a ton of very threatening villain characters, and despite that, most of its darkest episodes are dark on a philosophical level. I guess there really isn't anything scarier than the human brain. But I appreciate Adventure Time for being able to discuss these mature and dark themes while still maintaining what made the series so enjoyable in the first place. Make sure to tell me which episodes you think are the darkest in the comments, and have a happy Halloween. Kirby, out.